morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Yeah, we're going to be having a look at the front pages now with James Woodhousen, forecaster and author, and Dawn Neeson, former editor of the Daily Star. Good morning, both of you. You're fabulous in the first hour, so let's go again, shall we? Dawn, we'll start with you.
Isn't it?
Yes. Start with you. Daily Telegraph, shall we? Trust and the economy shaker.
Yes, we were just trying to decide what sweet, by the way. Sorry to go off on a very serious subject here. That Stephen looked like. I mean, we know you look gorgeous in
grey and blue.
Yeah, we couldn't think of a sweet. I mean,
not anything like overboiled cabbage, I should think.
No, you look like a dishwasher tablet.
Oh, thank you.
No, like
I thought it was Fox's Classier Mints you were comparing him with, Dawn.
No, that's us. We're coordinating.
They do have
Did you two have a chat before you came on?
Yeah, we do. I message people whenever I come
I've never
on here.
seen it before in my life.
We're going icy blue today, James.
Right.
There you go.
Anyway, back to the Telegraph, back to the really serious stuff. This is the front page of the Telegraph today, who are obviously going with the politics. I mean, you pay your money, you take your choice today. Quite a few of the papers have gone on the politics again, but some obviously on the Vardy Rooney thing. So this is Liz Truss is drawing up fact-right plans to give Number 10 more control over the economy. And I don't think, funny enough, Rishi will be featuring in her plans for a new Chancellor somehow.
No.
She's obviously she is the front runner now in the leadership race, and ballot papers go out this weekend if you're lucky to vote. So 160,000 people will be having their say. But she is believed to be considering installing Kwasi Kwarteng, the current business secretary, as Chancellor.
Really?
Really interesting.
That
Absolutely.
is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon Clarke.
He's another one who's younger than me.
I've got a story for you later on.
It's coming on about this one.
Great story about Stephen. Simon Clarke is set to stay on, which is okay, Chris. But also the one.
Simon Clarke?
He's sort of like a number 2 in the Treasury at the moment, I think.
Right.
Yeah, but a lot of people.
Secretary, I think.
Yes, I think so. But a lot of people are going, who? Sorry, I don't know actually who you are. But two names you will know, Stephen, are Jacob Rees-Mogg and John Redwood are expected to play a big part.
John Redwood?
He was actually Margaret Thatcher's head of policy, wasn't he? So if you remember back in the day. So she is actually going full-blown Margaret Thatcher.
It is,
and Channing, absolutely. But I mean, she's obviously, as I said, obviously focusing on the Treasury, because I think this is a Rishi issue, isn't it? We were saying actually, during the break that these people are on the same side, and if only Keir Starmer had shown as much energy in attacking the Tories as they're showing attacking one another, he wouldn't have the issue at the moment of no one actually knowing what he's done.
But it's a competition. They're going to be... I mean, I know we always say, oh, look at this, it's blue on blue, as they call it, which is not a phrase I like, because blue on blue is actually a very serious thing in the armed forces. But it's... there's going to be backbiting and fighting and all the rest of it.
The tendency to play the man or the woman, not the ball, is a real problem for us. We're facing all of these challenges, and I mean, I'm no fan of Liz Truss any more than I am of Rishi Sunak. I'm amused that she adopts the Labour Guardian line that the Treasury is to blame for all our problems. I think that's very glib and superficial. Where I think she's nearer the mark is rejecting Gordon Brown's independence for the Bank of England. I think if you look at Andrew Bailey's record at the Bank of England and before that at the Financial Conduct Authority, it's really disgraceful, and it could have been called out more than a year ago. And if she wants to return the the control of monetary policy and of interest rates to elected politicians rather than unelected bureaucrats, on that policy point, I completely agree with her.
Do you? You see, that's interesting, because I've never heard anyone else agree with that.
Well,
for the simple argument, and the reason it was moved in the first place back in '97, was that they're saying, well, when it comes to the economy, you don't want to be making political decisions. Governments will make decisions not necessarily for purely economic interests.
This is true, but they're elected, and technocratic decisions by an imbecile are far inferior to perhaps populist decisions made by elected politicians. We can kick them out. You and I can't kick out Andrew Bailey.
No.
And since Brexit, whatever you think about Brexit, democracy is a very important issue today. And if you take the libel laws being mobilised possibly by our weather forecasters, the Meteorological Office, against critics, If you take the Vardy versus Rooney case, another victory for a town called Sue, namely London, right? And all the lawyers are on TV, Carter Ruck, you know, enjoying the limelight, just like our healthcare technocrats not so long ago. You know, the people must have their say, and that includes control over monetary policy.
But what about the Monetary Policy Committee? I mean, you might not be a fan of Andrew Bailey, but I mean, he's not making these decisions on his own. The committee makes the decisions.
He chairs that committee, if I'm not mistaken. And can you name the people on the committee, Stephen?
No.
Well, there we are. You know, that's the problem I had with MEPs in the EU.
Or Simon Clarke, indeed, who
Yeah,
has been
indeed,
talking
Simon
about.
Clarke,
Sorry, Simon, if
you
you're
know.
watching, but, you know.
So it's time that people we voted for, you know, were put in the limelight and didn't outsource responsibility to really fundamental matters of the economy, like interest rate, and say, oh, not our job, lads, you know, sorry, it's, you know, it's out of our hands. You know, that's no way to run a democracy in the 21st century.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Your thoughts on that, please, if you would. GBViews at gbnews.uk. James, let's have a look at something else which may really hit the economy, actually, which is UK companies cutting ties with China. This is in the Financial Times.
Yeah. Well, you know, the first thing to say is that I'm not amazed that the Financial Times, which is basically nowadays a pink version of The Guardian, attributes so much influence to the CBI. CBI is not what it was under the Thatcher regime. I once gave a slideshow at the CBI, and they were more disorganised than the TUC. And that was 20 years ago. So, having said that, I think the important thing here is, yes, if firms cut ties with China, there is a chance of greater inflation, although China isn't just characterised by low wages anymore, and it's a technological power as well. But the thing I have to laugh about, or be sad about, is the green claim that renewables are always getting cheaper. If you look at that closely, leave aside wind power, solar power, which is a dubious matter in cloudy Britain, is nearly all the panels are made in Xinjiang and are the product of slave labour by the Uyghurs. So I can't believe that, you know, solar panels are going to get any cheaper because they're going to be inflationary like everything else. The claim that that's going to be cheaper than gas or nuclear is extremely dubious, and therefore we've got to inspect what environmentalists are saying, because they don't want to talk about China. They just want to talk about how you must stop using gas and everything else.
Isn't it interesting? The whole China thing at the moment is going back to the leadership debate with Rishi. I mean, when he was Chancellor, it's like, we need to work with China, we're setting up deals. And now he's actually a contender for being PM, we're not going to do any deals with China. And again, it's like that U-turn of opinion to get the right votes. But, you know, I mean, I'm like everyone else at the moment because of the situation globally. It's like, you know, I won't buy as much from China. So, you know, you might spend a bit more money. Again, it's hitting us all in the pocket, isn't it? You know, but I don't want to buy anything from China. I'd rather buy something British made. Do you think you can find anything British made? I mean, it's everything appears to be made in China.
Yeah, you can't pull out, I mean, you can cut off Russia economically with ease, but the integration in the world economy is such that whatever we feel about it, you know, just about everything in here and just about everything, as you say, Dawn.
It's really hard, even though you can make a conscious effort to find something that isn't made in China.
They've been the cheapest goods for decades, haven't they?
Yes.
So, you know, breaking the...
Frightening how much we depend on countries like China and Russia to a certain extent for the obviously...
And South Korea.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, a lot of the tech is South Korea.
I think the good news is, if I may, that, you know, the populace in China is getting more suspicious of the CCP, especially downtown Shanghai, where the repression, they've had robot dogs there with loud hailers telling people to stay in their flats for months on end. And there's only so long that the middle class and above all the working class in China is going to put up with that. Yes, the Chinese Communist Party has 95 million members, but, you know, watch the turmoil there, because it's growing. And Xi Jinping faces a major test.
But you're never going to get the problem with all that sort of talk is
there's not a lot of it.
It's that you're never going to get, if anything was going to happen, you're never going to get a bloodless coup in a place like China, are you?
Oh, that's true, but you know, I noticed Roger Boy's big opinion former on the Times saying, you know, the last thing we need now is unrest in China. I hear the argument. But what are you saying? And what is he saying? That we shouldn't support those people revolting against the Chinese Communist Party? That we want stability at any cost? And so on? China needs a big overturn. It's not going to be pretty. But I know whose side I'm on.
You know, I can't go to China. I was thrown out of China not long after the Tiananmen Square thing. I was a journalist working out there, and I was legally working out there. I knew I was a journalist, but suddenly, halfway through the job I was working on, nothing to do with Tiananmen Square, but it just happened to be the anniversary. They suddenly decided that they didn't want me in the country, so they took my passport, they took my money, they put me in a government hotel, which was basically a prison. The lock was on the outside of the door. And there was a very scary lady sitting at the end of the corridor monitoring where you came and go, and everywhere I went, I was followed. And in the end, they literally put me on the first plane out, escorted me to the airport, put me in the first plane to Hong Kong. And I've never applied for a visa since to try and go back. But that is a small taste of how they treat a foreign journalist. So as you were saying, James, how they treat their own people is just like...
Completely arbitrary, and people can see that. And Xi Jinping's facing a major problem because you don't have to be a revolutionary in China to see that the zero COVID policy has been a complete disaster. And now he's wanting a third unprecedented term.
The robot dogs thing, that's scaring me. Robot dogs?
Yeah, with a loud halo, as I say. But if I may top your story or try to, Dawn, on the Chinese...
How dare you?
I mean, just to remember that they're human beings, right? I got stuck in Hong Kong when it was still Hong Kong, Special Administrative Region. And I was caught without the visa stamp or the right passport in no man's land or something like that, with the customs people and all of that. And then one thing you learn about China when you go there, a 6'6" policeman, right, despite one's prejudices, took pity on me. A policeman, if you please, right? I've seen them bopping in a downtown bar in Shanghai, but that's another story. And he took pity on me and escorted me, probably breaking all the rules, into a safe bit, you know, the British bit, when it was a bit British. And because he could see how upset I was, because I was a stateless person, just by getting the wrong side of a tensor barrier. So even one or two police, you know, although they're universally hated in China, that's why they use men in white shirts to beat up demonstrators, not the police, because there'll be more of a reaction. But even this guy, was a long time ago, you know, had a human side. Let's not forget that.
Oh no, well it's the same with everything we talk about with Russia. You know, we're not talking about Russians. We're not talking about the Chinese. It's the leaders.
It's the Kremlin and the CCP.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's bring things a lot closer to home.
Shall we?
Dawn in the Daily Star, looking at Agatha Christie.
Actually, every single paper. I mean, you expect the red top tabloids to do this story big, and the Sun and the Star have got it on page one, but every single paper is covering this because 3 years, £3 million, two women who basically just needed their heads banging together in the first place have finally settled this case. So the Agatha Christie between Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy. And
is it Colleen's fault? It's interesting you say about the two women needed their heads banging together. Colleen did what she did, right? She posted the results of her
Instagram
work,
investigation.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But she didn't want this to go to court.
No, she didn't.
I'm not a particular fan of Colleen Rooney. I don't know much about her, but she didn't want to bring this.
She didn't. And to be fair to Colleen, she did try to settle out of court several times before this case went to court. And it's very unusual for these cases to get to court. I mean, most of these sort of like libel actions are settled beforehand. So she didn't want to do it. And Rebecca Vardy actually pushed it. And look, Rebecca, the first rule of holes, and she was in a hole to start off with, is stop digging, especially in a court. The only people winning in this are, I think, the lawyers. I mean, because it was just a fascinating insight into the world of the wags, and I hate myself for being interested, but I am. and the judge, who was a female judge as well, I mean, she's used to dealing with very serious issues, human rights issues, etc., must have been like, what am I listening to here? What is actually going on? Getting your head around. But a very, very damning 70-page ruling. Judge described Rebecca as evasive, disingenuous, and her account of events was wholly implausible. To be fair, Colleen and Wayne, to be fair, he was there by her side all the time, carrying her handbags, love that. He was there by her side, and they come out of it very well. I mean, the honest, reliable witness has given clear and compelling evidence. So And it's costing Rebecca Vardy a lot more. She can afford it, I'm guessing, thanks to the husband Jamie, but a lot more money, and her reputation is actually in tatters.
You see, she says on the front of the Sun, Colleen, it's clear I was right. Becky, the judge, got it wrong. Well, I'm afraid she's not going to win this argument, is she?
Well, I mean, is she going to? I mean, can you appeal? Is she going to appeal? Is she going to drag this on even more?
Can you appeal against this?
Honestly, I don't know the legal ins and outs of it, but obviously there's the. It's very obvious that Rebecca was giving stories to the papers. I mean, she infamously sold that story to the News of the World when it was around about Peter Andre and his chipolata, which he's had to live with all that time and has never answered back. So
I think one thing about this story, I was watching the BBC lunchtime news. Sorry to betray.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I'm going to put the knife in because they devoted 8 minutes, the first item, to this story. And now I understand that it takes up a lot of people's attention and all of that. But I've got to tell you that, at the Taiwan crisis with Nancy Pelosi's proposed visit to Taiwan got 10 seconds against 8 minutes. And, we're only talking about World War III here. I mean, nothing important.
this was World War III. Come on, James. This was important.
But, I think it's important because, and the Guardian, the FT even, they're all going bananas about this case when they're not knocking tabloid journalism and saying, oh, how frightfully,
this is the hypocrisy.
But then they go and do all of this.
The hypocrisy of the newspapers. I mean, but people are talking about it, and the point of a newspaper, every newspaper, is to reflect what people in the country are talking about.
And it's what everyone's talking about in the bars and the pubs.
Exactly,
Isn't it, really?
yeah.
It is, but one expected some sense of proportion, wrong?
No,
from the FT and from the BBC.
Oh, come on.
I think it's also a bit of an escape, isn't it, for everything that everybody's dealing with in
we
their
want
daily
that.
lives, and it's just drama, and it's people that all of us were obsessed with in the early noughties. The wags were on the front page of every tabloid press at the time, and now they're airing their dirty laundry.
And you know what?
It's like a guilty pleasure.
You know what, Ellie? The one thing I took from this case, if I'm ever going to end up in court, I know the restraining order is in force at the moment, Stephen, but I don't want that court artist. Remember the court artist at Tories? She made Wayne Rooney look like Spud You Like. It was dreadful.
It was not a good shot.
No, it wasn't. Sorry, you're watching.
Well, there you go. On that point, what do you make? It's not in the papers today. What did you make of the first televised judgment in court?
Oh.
Well, I thought the judge sounded and looked very authoritative.
She was very good.
She made the right call. I haven't thought it through yet. I'm sorry to admit this so early, but about televising cases.
I think
like
what was
that.
interesting was that it was a shot of the judge. We didn't even get to see the defendant, which I think is probably. But this is likely to progress. There's a lot of viewers and listeners were messaging in saying it's likely to progress now to showing the whole case.
Is it going to end up like Johnny Depp, the case where we saw
everyone's there with their popcorn?
Yeah, no, absolutely, where that was literally an ongoing soap opera. I mean, at the moment, it is like you can only show the judge, you can't show anyone else in the courtroom, you can't show the legal team, you can't show the defendant, you can only show the judge, and the summing up, it's one camera. The people there probably didn't even realise it was there. And I think in this particular case, it was a young lad who killed his granddad, if I remember rightly. But the summing up actually gave you a lot more nuance to what was going on, and that's what I quite liked. You heard the background of this lad, the fact that he had a
very troubled background.
Very, very troubled background, a lot of domestic violence, and he was doing it for his nan. Obviously what he did was horrific and wrong, but you learned the nuance of what was going on and why that judgment was made, and that's why I thought it was quite useful. I mean, the Vardy case would have been interesting to have been beamed live with your popcorn, but I think I can't see it going the same way as America.
And I think you're totally right there, Dawn, actually, because so many people hear somebody being sentenced and they say, oh, that's too short or that's too long.
Exactly.
Because they haven't been sat in a courtroom and they don't understand the nuances, like you say. And actually, that case was such a good example of why it should be televised. Because actually, once you hear the background of that young man, he was young, I think 25, and had been through really horrific circumstances, it made total sense. And
Interesting.
we'll see why that happens.
We've got 30 seconds left. William says, Stephen, please ask James if he agrees with the countries who are chopping down their rainforests to build on and progress their countries. Our green fields are no different.
Well, it's what I'd like to know from your correspondent is, has he got the numbers on the rainforest? You know, I like trees. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I do.
Don't be ashamed to admit
This is
it.
right. Trees are great.
Gag, you know, but this kind of knee-jerk green response that, you know, you want to defoliate the world. You love dirt and dust, and you're dirty. Not what he said, but where they like to go. I think does the environment a disservice, actually. Solar panels, just to go back to that, are terrible for environmental.
Right, we are out of time. Thank you both very much indeed. We'll see you a little bit later on. And don't go anywhere, because we've got all your top stories coming up in just a moment.